we decided to tackle a question that thousands of leaders are currently discussing at Glasgow, UK, right now as we speak. As you know, this is the week of COP26, the 2021 United Nations Climate Change Conference. For nearly 3 decades, the UN has been bringing together almost every country on Earth for global climate summits called COPs, which stands for Conference of the Parties. Most experts believe COP26 has a unique urgency, so it's only timely and appropriate for us to tackle the question, can innovation drive scale and economic value for ESG and sustainability, making it accessible to everyone from enterprise to end users? I have 2 esteemed guests joining us for this discussion. Stephanie Benedetto, CEO and co-founder of Queen of Raw, and Lisa Neuberger-Fernandez, who is a managing director for Accenture in our corporate citizenship practice. Stephanie, you're a corporate attorney turned into fashion tech and sustainability entrepreneur, and also the CEO and co-founder of the Queen of Raw, which I believe is a marketplace to buy and sell used textiles, keeping them out of landfills and turning them into what you say, which I love, pollution into profit. Would love to hear about your background and experience and what got you to the intersection of innovation and sustainability.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here today. I actually come from a family background of over 100 years as entrepreneurs and innovators, in particular in fashion and textiles. So what I'm doing today is not too far from what my great-grandfather did in 1896. He actually came over on a ship from Austria. He landed at Ellis Island, and he settled into the Lower East Side of New York, which was the original garment district. And as an immigrant chasing the American dream, he had to make a living for his family. So what did he do? He found materials and supplies nearby, old fabrics and furs and things immigrants had brought over on the ships with them, but weren't using anymore. And he would repurpose them into beautiful fashion garments that he sold to local customers. And it was a very profitable, successful business. And he didn't talk about it as sustainability, but at the end of the day, that's very much what it was. Now, I didn't do the family route. I actually ended up on Wall Street as a corporate attorney, but I did specialize in fashion, technology, and sustainability. So I guess at the end of the day, right, we get back to our roots and who we are. You can't deny that. And when the market crashed in 08 and 09, kind of similar to what's going on in the world today, right? I took that as my opportunity to go out on my own, go innovate, go be an entrepreneur, build businesses, and change the world. And I kind of never looked back. You know, I felt like periods of disruption are incredible opportunities to innovate for the future. And as you kindly noted, we built Queen of Raw as a marketplace with software. So businesses small to large can find waste, sell waste, and most importantly, minimize waste going forward. So excited to be here chatting about all this kind of what innovation can do for the future.
Fantastic. What a journey and what an unexpected crossroad, right? Love that. Lisa, you are more of what I call an intrapreneur, right? Managing director, large organization like Accenture, but really driving impact through corporate citizenship. So what's your journey? How did you find yourself at that intersection of innovation and sustainability?
Thanks, Shivani. It's great to be here with both of you today. And I love the way Stephanie took it back to her roots. So I'll do a little bit of the same. I come from a long line of half entrepreneurs and half corporate people. My dad was a big corporate guy, and my mom and my brother are entrepreneurs as well as my grandma. And I found a way to bring the two together. I've been with Accenture since I graduated from college over 20 years ago. And my career has started in strategy consulting. And the second half has been in corporate citizenship, leading our strategy and innovation programs for the company globally. But the whole time I've been at Accenture, I've always had this passion for driving social innovation, social and environmental innovation, and finding ways to launch and spark new initiatives through the company that have ranged from a patented social return on investment model that we called public service value and created a whole practice around, to helping to launch our sustainability consulting practice, and from a volunteer role on a green team back many years ago. I've always been really interested in the role that business has to play in society. And I started to learn about that topic when I worked at a series of G7 summits back in high school and college, back when it was only the G7. And I noticed the absence of the private sector at that time. And I was always really curious, where was the private sector? This is going back more than 20 years, and interested in how we can drive action through the private sector to tackle some of the big social and environmental challenges of our time.
Now, since this is the innovation moment, Stephanie, I have to ask you, what does innovation mean to you?
It's a great question, because that I word innovation, kind of like that S word sustainability, right? It means so many things to so many people. For me and what I believe, it's about building solutions that support that triple bottom line, that make sense for people, for planet, but also for profit. And I feel like sometimes when we're talking about innovation, especially innovation and sustainability, we spend a lot of time focused on the numbers and the metrics, which are so important, and talking about why this impacts people and planet. But we kind of forget about that final piece, profit. And I truly believe for the biggest companies in the world and for consumers, for them to adopt and innovate any kind of a new solution, it needs to make economic sense as well as do good, right, for people and for planet. And when you're innovating, I always want to be challenging the old school ways of doing things, because that is how we truly move forward. When I looked at kind of supply chains and what was going on in the world, especially in the space of fashion and textiles, I saw a lot of companies operating their businesses the way my great-grandfather did in 1896, right? With good old pen and paper, or maybe if they were a little bit better, they were using Excel spreadsheets. And when you have this kind of old school way of doing things, it can be a challenge, but it can also be a huge opportunity, right? How do you get companies to innovate digitally, to get off those Excel spreadsheets, right, and truly build something for the future? And I think you can't talk about how you think about innovation kind of without thinking about why you do what you do and why you care about innovating. And for me, I'm very much doing this for my children. I want them to have clean water to drink, clothes that aren't toxic to wear, and a planet to live on. And I'm not stopping until I do. And one final little story that I'll mention that really solidified why innovation matters to me. I was pushing my, at the time, 3-year-old son, Jacob, in the streets in New York City. And it was really loud, like New York City can be. And there was a lot of honking and noise. And I hear something coming out of the stroller. And I leaned forward, and all I could hear was my son, Jacob, saying, "Are you naked right now? You're not, because you're using fabric. It's everywhere and it's polluting your water." He was literally doing my 60-second pitch. And on the one hand, I felt like, okay, maybe that means as a working mom, I've been practicing my pitch a few too many times. But then on the other hand, I said, you know what? If my children can understand this, then anyone can understand this and innovate for the future. And that's really what excites me every day.
That really resonates with me, Stephanie. What a great story. I have to confess that I got into sustainability also for personal child-oriented reasons. It was back in the Bay Area right around the year 2007, and I called my friend who ran this thing called Net Impact, and she said, "Well, here's some products to buy, here's some products not to buy, but I have a bigger idea for you. Why don't you join the Net Impact Green Challenge," which was a corporate competition to see how far green teams could move their company's sustainability agenda forward in 3 months. And when Accenture won first prize in that competition, I was able to find some new jobs for myself in the company, because we started to get inbound contacts from clients. How is Accenture greening itself in North America, and what can we do? And that turned into, fast forward many years later, 15 years later, into where I am today. So that really resonates. Think about the kids.
That's great, Lisa, but then why is sustainability important now? What's the urgency? What's the burning platform now around this, Lisa?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we are 1 year into what the UN calls the decade to deliver. We have 9 years left. And sadly, the numbers aren't all going in the right direction. And the experience that we've had with COVID has also kind of put a whole new shock into the system, essentially. It's accelerated massively certain things like the adoption of digital technologies so much faster. It warp speed so much faster than was ever predicted before, but it's also wrought many inequalities and kind of opened our eyes to so many inequalities. And COVID has also it asks every one of us to think about our purpose, because we can see in front of us, mortality issues. So I'd say COVID and COP26 kind of point us towards the need for action. And if we're going to reach the UN Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, there's a big opportunity for action. I tend to be an optimist. I see, big problems, and I see, big opportunities to drive change. So we hear all the statistics, the scary statistics all the time, but I'd say the big message is that we have 9 years. It's time for action, and let's do this together. I think it's important to give people a sense of agency, and that's why we try to create many different specific opportunities for our people. If we can activate and upskill and empower thousands and millions of people to understand what it's going to take to put our planet on the right trajectory, that we can do it. Like we can make a difference, we can work together. And if we can activate our people at Accenture, there's more than 600,000 people that work here, or the people that we know, our clients, our suppliers, our ecosystem partners like Stephanie, we can start to turn the tide in a positive way, but it's going to take new ways of thinking, and it's going to take sustained and clear action, clear-minded action, and leadership to work across different sectors and across different countries and across different groups to make these happen.
So Stephanie, most folks get why sustainability is important. Of course, everybody wants to save the planet. But then why is it so difficult to actually put it into action, to implement this? Why are corporations having such a hard time in moving the sustainability needle?
And I love, Shivani and Lisa, that you both use that word, right? To activate, to incentivize, to empower. That is what is so important about what we do, right? Because we can build the greatest things in the world and innovate, but if people don't actually adopt our solution, if consumers and large companies don't use it, then what are we doing? And I think it kind of comes down to two key reasons. And I'd like to myth bust here a little bit about two assumptions that people always have about sustainability that we believe, and we're here to talk about why it's incorrect. The first is that sustainability automatically has to cost you more money to participate. So many people hear that word and as consumers assume something is more expensive, or as businesses assume it's going to cost me a lot of time and resources and money to adopt, and so we can't afford it. And what's interesting is if you look at the new innovations in the business models that through COVID and beyond are really going bananas, it's the ones that actually are sustainable, but save and make you money. The movement around resale, reuse, right? All of this unlocks huge value for businesses. They can actually save and make money by adopting sustainability. They can find, in working with us, all the waste and unused inventory that they're sitting on, and that's more today than ever before. And they can actually sell it and take that money that they make and turn around and put it back into doing good work in their supply chains, right? Then they can pay their workers more. They can adopt that digital technology innovations that Lisa was talking about. They can use more sustainable materials and resources. And they can do it all without their CapEx expenditure going up. And I think that's really important for businesses to realize. The second piece is that, let's myth bust, is that sustainability, it's only good for small, little eco-conscious collections or little pilot projects, but we can't do it automated and at scale. And obviously, as I know, we can dive deeper into leveraging partnerships with Accenture and others, leveraging technology integrations, leveraging blockchain, machine learning, AI. we can do this, and we do it automated and at scale for the biggest companies in Fortune 500 in the world. And so if you could remove those barriers early on in how you think about sustainability, I think it opens the door to create so much value, of course, for businesses, but also consumers who can get access quickly and easily and at their fingertips to discounted stuff that's actually sustainable as well. So just that different way of thinking, and as we talked about, challenging the old school ways of doing things, I think is really important.
I'm glad you brought up consumers, because when you think about sustainability, a lot of it comes down to behavior change from people like the three of us. And the question is, what's preventing that behavior change from happening? Or if you flip it around to the incentives, what are the incentives to drive consumer behavior change? And if you think about it, there's typically three ways that you can drive change. One is the carrot and the incentives, make this part of your job, tie this to performance. And then there's the stick, red light, green light, show lists where you're somehow, moving into the red if you do this. Like some energy companies have started to do that, like look at your energy bill compared to your neighbors in your neighborhood. But then there's the third lever, which is bringing out the passion and bringing out the purpose. And when you can tap into somebody's purpose and passion and vision, you get people to go above and beyond and to do things that they didn't even plan to do perhaps before. And when you think about behavior change in the sustainability sense, I think of two examples. One is the Carbon Disclosure Project, and the other one is smoking. In terms of the Carbon Disclosure Project, I think that it's been proven that it has been an incredibly powerful mechanism to move corporate change around sustainability. And what was the model? The model was to get a whole group of institutional investors behind the organization and to request carbon data from companies. And with all of the company's investors involved in the request, it started to speak. And then it became this like red light, green light, and the stick. Essentially, no company wants to be graded below their direct competitor. And as the Carbon Disclosure Project gained more and more traction, it became, we kind of call it the Carbon Olympics. And we want to win the Carbon Olympics. So it's possible to get more approvals for disclosures in order and to change practices to win the Carbon Olympics. And the other example that I think about in terms of consumer behavior change is smoking. And I think about the practices that were put in place to encourage people to stop smoking. Things like in the airports, you could see smoking rooms. You could see sections of the room with a circle. If you want to smoke, go stand over there, and essentially drawing attention to people who were smoking and making you think twice before you go into that group. And yet, even knowing what are the effects of smoking, it may or may not influence that consumer behavior change. So I think with sustainability, we have a big opportunity, big set of gaps there, but maybe we can learn from some of these examples.
Stephanie, you have seen actually both worlds. You've seen the corporate world and you've also seen the startup world. Given your experiences, what are some of the steps that you think we can take in changing this consumer behavior and actually improving consumer adoption around sustainability?
I think what's really interesting is that unless we're all going to go naked, we are going to consume clothing, right? And other things. Just how we consume it, why we consume it, what it's made of, where it comes from, who it goes to. That's what's changing and innovating in supply chains around the world right now. And that is a huge opportunity for us to build for that supply chain of the future, one that is more on demand, more local, more digital, and more sustainable. When it comes to consumer behavior, we can actually now, at point of purchase, indicate for a consumer making that choice between, a number of items, the amount of water, the toxins, the carbon emissions, and in some cases, the dollars saved by them purchasing one item over another, something that was made sustainably or reused and repurposed. And I think that's really powerful for a consumer to have that transparency and track and trace right up front at their fingertips, quickly and easily, right? With the swipe of a smartphone, they can make those educated choices that they just didn't have before. And what's even more interesting is they can actually track their own progress as a buyer, as a consumer, of how well they're doing, how much water have they saved over this time period by purchasing more sustainably. And they can actually, it can be gamified. They can be rewarded by the brands for their loyalty and for their good actions and get those discounts and coupon codes, right? And so that's where we start to unlock value, of course, for businesses, but also for consumers who are incentivized, who get the economic advantage. With the huge movement we've seen in resale and reuse, you think of ThredUp, The Real, StockX, Poshmark, Depop, right? You actually, as a consumer, can buy a like quality good, but it actually costs you a lot less. Sometimes in our platform, it's up to 90% off wholesale. So you're getting that like quality at a steep discount with a sustainable benefit. And if you think about it as a consumer, how do you say no to that? And I think that's really powerful and important as we build for this future. I heard one person actually compare what we were doing. I was on a panel with ThredUp, one of the founders, a while back. And he said that he thinks about the reuse, recycling, redistribution models that are going on in the world kind of as a competitor of fast fashion. And I never really thought about what Queen of Raw and ThredUp is doing as a competitor to fast fashion, but really it is. And what's interesting about that is you don't actually have to change consumer behavior. You can still change your outfits, change your clothes, be, Instagram worthy or TikTok worthy. Brands can still sell things, but they can do it in a more sustainable way. And again, that's the win-win-win. And I think really unlocks value and a huge opportunity for the future.
But then why are these practices not being adopted? What are some of the biggest barriers that you see, Stephanie, for adoption, and how do we close this action intention gap?
Well, I think not everybody, right, knows right away how to adopt these kinds of technologies, how to actually know the track and trace story and journey of that product, or how to measure impact. That's where partnerships and solutions like ours and other powerful innovators can really drive change. And I think for a long time, a lot of people, especially in this industry, were very hesitant to partner with each other, to integrate with each other, to leverage each other's technology solutions. You kind of want to protect your innovation, right? Dominate in one industry and then grow and scale from there. But I truly believe, and we've kind of incorporated into the DNA of Queen of Raw early on, how important partnerships are and leveraging each other's solutions and integrating. That just helps everyone grow and scale. And to do that, we work with individuals and consumers. We work with other companies from small to large. We even work with government. And we had a partnership with New York City called the New York Circular City Initiative. We joined forces with H&M, Unilever, Cisco, Goldman Sachs, and a host of other companies and organizations, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And we actually wrote a white paper showing how many good jobs could be created and how much money could be saved and made by New York City going circular in the coming years. But let me be clear, it isn't just about changing the laws around the world, which are already happening. You think of EPR policies, recycling laws, and whatnot. But you don't want to just slap businesses with millions of dollars in liability in the books. What are the vetted solutions like ours that can actually help businesses offset that coming legal liability and drive value and change? And as we've been talking about, incentivize action and democratize access to these resources for everyone. And I think that's where we need to be thinking about how we work across industries, around the world with everyone. We actually even have a non-for-profit arm, and we pledge a portion of our proceeds to them, but we also give them an opportunity to sell their goods through our marketplace and open up their community and their economic profit in their world. And I think just thinking differently and building these kinds of cross-industry, cross-sector collaborations and partnerships, that's how we're going to change the world together.
Yeah, what you've just described is like a picture-perfect example of collective leadership and working across sectors to achieve a shared vision. And that's it's wonderful to hear. And it's exactly the type of leadership that we're looking for from our partners in the Sustainability Innovation Challenge, where we have a common goal around circularity, and we bring together partners from startups, academics, corporates, governments, investors, foundations, et cetera, to think, how do we break down all these walls and really work together and really reach out and translate what it's going to take to achieve these shared goals, but translate across all these different sectors, because sometimes we speak a different language, and that can sometimes get in our way. But one of the things you talked about was better information, track and trace, more information to consumers. And I wonder if that's enough. You know, back to the smoking example, like when you buy a pack of cigarettes, you see pictures of really bad things happening, but yet, of course, people are still buying cigarettes. So how do we go beyond just the information to the thing that will kind of bring out the action that will, you know, bring out people's beliefs and you know, desires to take that action? What have you seen that
Yeah,
works?
and Lisa, to that point, right? How can innovation actually help with closing?
I always felt like there was huge economic opportunity, but a lot of people weren't paying attention to it for so long, right? You were operating as the status quo, businesses were moving faster and faster, things were booming and growing. And then obviously COVID hit. And now we have this unique opportunity to almost reinvent and innovate more than ever before. And I truly believe the biggest and best innovations in companies come out of massive periods of disruption, like what we're going through right now. But to be clear, you know, it does take, as we've talked about, all these different sectors, but it definitely takes a different way of thinking about things. There was actually a book written by a friend of ours, Bob Lutke, called Transformative Markets. And he worked on an algorithm with Georgetown, and he analyzed all this publicly available information. And he wanted to see who was considered the biggest leaders in transforming global markets around sustainability and innovation. And somehow, you know, it was incredible. We actually ranked the highest in trustworthiness, above some of the biggest and best companies in the world. And, you know, I asked him, why did we rank so high, and what does this mean, and how can we all innovate together this way? And he said there were 3 reasons. One is that we were always out there talking about what we were doing, educating people, sharing our learnings, and trying to democratize access to these resources and technologies. 2, he said, the other reason you had very strong partnerships, and you really tried to align yourself with powerful players in the world to help them do better and think differently. And 3, he said, we were very clear and articulated in how we talked about measuring impact. We did speak out about the water, the toxins, right? The carbon emissions and the waste we've saved, and track and measure that and share that. And I think when businesses and individuals start to feel confident talking about these things publicly, when they've got the metrics and the data on a blockchain record, leveraging machine learning, using solutions like ours, you can feel more confident about speaking about what you're doing. Because honestly, I believe a lot of the world's biggest and best companies are innovating right now. They're just not talking about it. And the more we can get people comfortable talking about it and partnering and supporting each other, that's really, I think, how we're going to have massive impact. And to date, I'm really proud to say for us, we've saved over 1 billion gallons of water, and we're just getting started. It's actually enough clean water for 1.4 million people to drink around the world for 3 years. And I mention all that, not just because I'm really proud of the work our team has done, but also because never doubt that the small actions that you take, when you add them up, even as a startup, can have a massive impact on the world, for sure.
That is really inspiring on many levels. One thing that you've talked about is the expectations of the business community. And there's no doubt that the private sector has a big role to play in this path to a more sustainable future. And all parts of the private sector, from startups through to Fortune 500 companies. And what we're seeing in the run up to COP26 is that expectations are really high on businesses. Every kind of ratings agency, NGO that looks for companies to sign up to pledges is asking for companies to sign all kinds of things about the race to zero, and even to go beyond carbon to tackle nature in corporate supply chains. And it'll be interesting to see what happens at COP. But one thing to look for is is what happens right after COP. And as the private sector really digs in and starts to take the actions that we've all committed to. We're seeing so many companies and so many countries come forward with pledges and commitments in the run up to COP. But the after COP really is when the rubber hits the road, and that's when we need to be, looking for action. And to your point, Shivani, that's where innovative ways to drive mass adoption of these sustainable practices, that's when it really matters. And that's when we have an opportunity to really build that future.
So, Stephanie, where can corporations start? You talked about what consumers can do. You also touched on what startup community companies can do. But where do large enterprises or corporations start? What's the first step that they need to take? And then how do they move forward from there?
What we've found in talking to some of the biggest and best companies in the world is that they all make these incredible commitments and put a stake in the ground that by 2025, 2030, right, we're going to be 100% sustainable. And that's great. It speaks volumes that this matters so much for all the reasons we've been talking about. But it's almost like paralyzing, right? Where do you go and what do you do on day one? How are you going to get end-to-end transparency and a perfectly digital supply chain with all the information you need from a tier 1 to a tier 14 supplier? I mean, it's overwhelming. And so I'm a big proponent of small, steady actions that really, when you add them up, are actually more massive than you think. And one of the most obvious places that so often historically got overlooked was a business's waste. They are literally sitting on a gold mine of unused inventory, from raw materials to finished goods, and opportunities to take that waste, to monetize that waste, and then obviously take that money and put it back to doing good work. And then now that you know about that waste, where it came from, why you had it, who it goes to, you can grow from there, right up and down your supply chain, and ultimately get to that fully transparent, 100% track and trace sustainable supply chain. But you have to know where to go and what to do on day one. And just to kind of put the hammer on the nail one more time, to give you a few results of what our enterprise customers have seen. One of our Fortune 500 customers saved 15% of their bottom line in 1 year, just by finding and selling this waste. And not only that, by talking about the good actions that they were doing with their waste, they actually saw 3 times the conversion rate in their online direct-to-consumer business, just by talking about it.
Wow.
And so huge opportunities to continue to grow from there, and let's go change the world.
I love what you say about all the little steps matter, and that pertains to each of us as individuals and taking actions one by one and being part of a bigger movement. And I like what you said about turning waste into profit. Shivani, when you ask where do companies start? Like, where can companies start on their sustainability journey? The way that we like to think about it is that you start by looking at the impacts that the company has and looking at the assets that the company has. So in terms of impacts, you can think, what are the impacts in terms of carbon emissions, in terms of waste, in terms of water usage, in terms of impacts in nature? And you kind of start by looking at what are the biggest ones, and then you look at your assets. What are the assets that you have? The people, the intelligence of your people, the technology, the processes, the client networks, the supply chain networks, et cetera. And then you kind of look for the merger and look for the 2-for-1 specials where you can, bring together your people with suppliers to tackle one of the topics like waste, if you're a retail company, for example, and that kind of helps you get a roadmap.
What are some of the pitfalls to avoid?
When we first started talking about issues of waste in supply chains and inefficiencies years ago, we did end up only talking to the sustainability departments. And oftentimes they were a newly created position. and they weren't fully integrated into all the different pieces of these large enterprise organizations, didn't have the directives yet set, didn't know exactly what the goals were. And a lot of times they didn't really have the budget that they deserved. And I truly believe that in order to have the change and the impact that you want, this is not just about the sustainability departments, although don't get me wrong, they're amazing. They're your brand champions and a key part of this. But you need the CEOs who are setting the corporate agenda. You need the CMOs who are doing the marketing, the storytelling, the CIOs and COOs managing the supply chain, the technology, and the innovation departments. You need supply chain procurement who touch this stuff, right? And the CFOs, because these are liabilities and inefficiencies. And when you get all of them together in a room, the impact that that has on a business's bottom and top line while driving innovation and sustainability, it's unbelievable. And I think if the businesses who think about innovating in that way today are going to be the ones who not only survive, but truly thrive.
I couldn't agree with you more. To be able to drive sustainability through a corporation or through any kind of an organization, and it requires a really sustained change management plan. And this is about changing behavior, back to what we were talking about before. And we're talking about changing behavior in terms of corporate policies, corporate processes, and ways of business that used to be. We need to learn and also unlearn sort of basic ways of acting. And that requires the vision to know where we're going, as well as the ability to change minds and to kind of close that action intention gap all the way through a company. And what we're seeing more and more of these days is that senior leaders in most big companies that you can see out there really get it. The issues in front of all of us are very real. They're painfully right on the front page of the newspaper every day, and people get it. But when it comes to changing the behaviors, a process that's always been done this way, an incentive structure that may not be aligned with these new goals, and that's where it gets harder and harder to drive the change and to make that that change happen. And the other thing that we see in sustainability innovation is that you may find a new practice, but how do you take that to scale? And how do you get adoption of this practice in a sustained manner?
Can innovation drive scale and economic value for ESG and sustainability? And what we heard from Stephanie and Lisa is a resounding yes. In particular, when you apply this to adoption of these practices at scale, B2B or B2C. Now, how do you go about doing this? As a business leader or a consumer, first, start with the purpose. Understand the true reason why sustainability is critical for you or for your consumers. And then build upon that through awareness, education, behavioral change management. And as Stephanie talked about, take those small steps to close that action intention gap. Next, Lisa talked about setting the right metrics and incentives. Sometimes a stick works better than a carrot. It's not one or the other. In some cases, it's both. Management guru Peter Drucker once said, only what gets measured gets managed. So commit to those right benchmarks and metrics to ensure progress. And finally, build solutions that make sense for people, planet, and profit. You don't have to choose between the two. Stephanie gave some great examples. Challenge the old school way of doing things. This is where innovation can help. Thank you, Stephanie and Lisa, for your time today and for a very meaningful discussion on this topic on sustainability and innovation.
Thank you, Shivani.
Yeah, and reflecting on our conversation, hopefully folks leave with a sense of positivity and are empowered to be the change catalyst. It is up to us to take that initiative. Change is driven by folks like each and every one of you who are ready to take that first step. So let's take that first step together. You've already got Lisa and Stephanie who are leading the way. Thank you, folks.